Hey guys, welcome back to Fix It Friday. So today we're going to be working on the Nintendo Wii, and I'm going to be showcasing a relatively new HDMI mod for the Wii called the AVE HDMI. Now, this is not the first HDMI mod to come out for the Nintendo Wii. The first one that I'm aware of was the Wii Dual. And then not too long ago, I actually did a video on the Wii HDMI, which was developed by Artemis. And all three of these mods are using the GC video solution as a way of getting a purely digital signal from the Wii and just outputting it via HDMI. This one is developed by a company that goes by the name of Electron Shepard, which is like such a cool name. Really love that name. And I've got to say, like, I really like this design. It's very compact. It's the smallest of the mods, and I always enjoy working on these HDMI mods just because they're usually fun and challenging to do, and then, you know, they're extremely convenient to use. Just plug it into your TV, and that's the end of the story. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and work on this console. This one actually has had an attempted mod installed already, which did not work out. So this is not exactly a vanilla installation, but I'll still go through all of the steps. All right, let's get to it. Okay, so we have the Wii here on the bench, and I'm gonna go ahead and start tearing it down. And this is something I'm gonna do rather quickly. I'm not gonna go into the teardown into depth. One reason is that it actually takes quite a long time to take this thing apart. There's a lot of screws, and it's kind of a video all unto itself, and it's something I've documented before, and you can definitely find videos on how to tear down the Wii safely and correctly. So I'm gonna go ahead and just get started, and then we'll just move on to the more interesting stuff. Okay, so the Wii has been completely disassembled, and so first what I want to show you is the case modifications that are needed in order to do this installation. And so again, some of this stuff has been done for me by the owner of this thing, so I just wanted to kind of show you what they did. But in all fairness, it looks pretty good. So here's the bottom RF shield, and you can see that a small amount of the metal has been removed here. So you can easily do this with a pair of pliers where you just grab it, make it flat, and then just go back and forth, and the mechanical pressure will eventually break that cleanly, as you can kind of see right over here. The other thing is just to show you the underside of the Wii motherboard, and so you can see that the AVE HDMI is more or less going to sit like this, like more or less around here. And it is a little bit different depending on which revision of the Wii you have, but in this particular case, it's going to sit like this, more or less. They also left the HDMI port, which gets installed over here, and that looks actually perfectly fine. There's no reason to uninstall that. And you'll see that when we're all done, we're going to run this flex cable from the AVE HDMI all the way to this HDMI port that's located right over here. All right, let me see what else I can show you real quick. I think the last thing to show you, which again I did not do, but someone else has, is the HDMI cutout. So let me just show you that briefly. And thankfully for the Wii, this is one of the easier things to do. Let me just... Okay. Hopefully this is showing up on camera, but you can see that they cut a small rectangular hole over here. This is where the AVE, where the HDMI port ends up getting located. And as you can see, this whole right-hand side over here you don't need to do really much of any cutting. It's really only the depth on it, and then of course on this side. And the way to do that is just to kind of mark these spots with a blade, and then use a file and a blade basically to just kind of slowly remove material until you have a nice tight fit. So yeah, that's what's been done here. And again, I apologize that I can't show that, but those are kind of minor things compared to the actual installation. So let's go ahead and move over to the main installation. Okay, so I'm getting ready to install the AVE HDMI, and I just wanted to show you a little bit about how this board works effectively. So what you have is this flex cable here, and you're going to be, instead of installing this directly to the AVE chip, you're going to be installing it to these vias, which make direct connections to the pins on the AVE chip. And this gives you a pure digital video audio experience, which then goes to the HDMI. So as you can see on the AVE board, there's two sets of vias that you can solder to the Wii motherboard. So this set is for a later set of revisions, and these are listed on the Electron Shepard website. And we happen to have an older model Wii, and so that means that we're going to be using this set of vias right here. So as you can see, I've used a little bit of Kapton tape and wrapped it around this part of the board so that these cannot make any kind of contact with anything. And so of course, if you have a different model, if you have a newer model, then you would actually apply the Kapton tape here and isolate this. And so you can kind of see this here, but I'm going to actually move in closer so you can get a better view. But you can see that there are a whole bunch of vias here that are already tinned. And so these are the ones that we're going to be connecting the AVE board up to. And all of these vias are coated in solder mask. So if you try to add solder to them, you really don't get any kind of effect. So you actually have to scrape away some of that solder resist and come in and then tin all of those vias. So what I'm going to do now is just switch over to a higher power camera, and you guys can have a look at that a little bit more up close. Okay, so now we have a close-up of the vias that we need to solder the flex cable onto. And so you can see that the previous installer actually tinned all of the vias that needed to be tinned. But normally these are covered with solder mask. And so what you've got to do is use a magnifying glass or a microscope like I'm doing here. And then using a very fine craft knife, you can scrape the vias like you see me kind of simulating here. And then you expose the copper and then add some fresh solder, and then you can tin them. If they don't have nice little, balls of solder on them, then they're not really ready. So now that everything is tinned, what we're going to do is try to align this flex cable so that these vias are overlapping the tinned vias on the motherboard. Okay, so now you can see that I have the flex cable overlaid on the vias, and you can actually see the solder overlapping as well. Now, if I push down here with these forceps, you can actually see through this flex cable really nicely. And so that really helps to align everything perfectly. So that's something I really like about this design by Electron Shepard, is that the fact that it's somewhat transparent lets you see through using either magnifying glass or a microscope, and gets a really perfect alignment. If you're misaligned, you might end up bridging stuff together or soldering to the wrong vias, and nobody wants that. All right, so now that everything is kind of in place, what I'm doing is using my iron to just kind of tack things down. So that's what you see me doing here, just kind of tacking in the major components. And I'm just using the forceps here just to hold everything in place. So this is not at all perfect. It's just kind of a preliminary pass at trying to get everything attached. Once it's kind of to my satisfaction, then I'm going to come in with, with the fresh solder, and I'm going to really go to town on each of these and get them soldered in properly. You'll notice that the flux and the flux that I used ended up taking that Kapton tape off of the flex cable. So after these are soldered in, I actually put in a new bit of tape to protect those vias from bridging on anything. Okay, so now that the most difficult part of the installation is complete, we're going to turn our attention to these 4 pads right here. So this provides 5 volts, 3.3 volts ground, and then there's a GameCube pad right over here. And we're going to connect those to 4 places on the motherboard. So this provides power to the AVE HDMI, and it also connects the AVE over to this GameCube port all the way down here in the bottom corner. And that lets you access the GC video menu by using a button combo, which I think is holding L, R, X, and Y, but that's just from my memory. I could be mistaken about that. Okay, but needless to say, that's what we're going to be doing now. And thankfully, this is not too difficult. In fact, there's lots of stuff that's very helpfully labeled on the board. So right over here, these 2 points right here, this is the 3.3 volt rail. And so we can just take a small wire and solder it from here to 3.3 volts. Ground is all over the place, and it's labeled, in fact, in many places, but the closest one really is the bottom end of this ceramic capacitor right over here. So we're gonna make a connection there. Our 5 volts is very helpfully labeled right over here. So we're gonna do that. And then finally, for the GameCube port, there is a pad called TP27, Test Pad 27, and it depends on what revision you've got, but it's always located close to this control port right here. So we're gonna take a connection from there and bring it all the way up to this GCD pad. And then finally, we're gonna run a flex cable, which is provided with the kit, and it's gonna go from here to the mini HDMI out over here. All right, so let's get these final connections taken care of. Okay, so as you guys can see, the installation is pretty much complete at this point. So we've got our 3.3 volts, we've got our ground, we've got our 5 volts, and then right over here, we've got our connection to the GameCube port. I installed the flex cable with the blue side facing down towards the motherboard. So you can see that over here, and then with 2 folds over here, it goes into the HDMI port right here. You want to be careful not to crease these too aggressively because you could break the connections on the flex cable, and you definitely don't want that. And yeah, that is basically it. So we're pretty much good to go at this point. I'm gonna go ahead and reassemble the console off camera, and then we're gonna go ahead and take a look at it and give it a quick test. Okay, so I've mostly reassembled the console, but it definitely is a good idea to not necessarily screw everything in place when you're doing your initial test. The reason why is that if something's wrong, it takes like easily another like 15-20 minutes just to take the console apart. So if you're doing your first test, you know, put in a few screws just to hold everything down, but you don't have to go nuts. Don't fully reassemble it. So yeah, as you can see, I don't even have the faceplate on there. It's not really necessary for this test, but all the other parts are plugged in, and I have a GameCube controller in port 1 over here so I can test the button combinations. So let me just go ahead and turn this on. Ugh, can't see what I'm doing. There we go. All right, so it's turning on, and all right, yes, it's looking like we're getting picture. That's great, and I see the little GC video highlighted up there. Let me just zoom in a small amount. So yeah, it does look like it's working. So now what I'm gonna do is just hold down L, R, X, and Y for a few seconds on my controller. Okay, awesome. And that is bringing up this menu right here. This menu is for the GC video. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is go into output settings, and I'm just gonna hit X, and you wanna turn enhanced DVI mode to on. And what that does basically is it turns on the sound. So if you do this test and you don't turn that on, then you'll get video but no audio, and you might think that there's a problem, but in fact there's nothing wrong. It's just the fact that you didn't turn that setting on. So I don't have a remote synced with this. I'm just gonna give this thing a couple of seconds and we're gonna let it boot up, and oh, here we go. Okay. All right, awesome. Everything is looking really nice and crisp. We've got sound, everything's working correctly. So yeah, this was a successful installation. So let me go ahead and finish rebuilding this thing, and I'll show you the finished result, and we'll kind of go from there. All right, so I have the Wii fully assembled, and you know, it looks really fantastic. There's the HDMI port in the back, and yeah, I mean, it honestly looks as though it always was there to begin with. I always thought it was strange that Nintendo never made a version with HDMI. I mean, you know, the PS3 had one, the Xbox 360 did. The Wii just never did that. It just stayed analog, but, you know, didn't really matter. The Wii was a very successful console. I personally really enjoyed the hell out of it, and it was one of my first consoles that I ever got into soft modding with. So, yeah, it's just fantastic. And yeah, this mod looks really outstanding, and, you know, as long as you have a magnifying you know, like a microscope or some kind of magnification, it's really not that bad to do, and the results speak for themselves. It's fantastic. So yeah, that's it for this week's video. If you guys like this kind of content, then please consider subscribing to the channel. I have videos out, you know, every other week, or, you know, whenever I can get them out. And of course, if you need a console repaired or modified, if you want to have this installed, you can always reach me directly at oneuprestorations.com. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.